I never believed in the idea that places could remember pain until the night I agreed to spend alone inside the abandoned house at the edge of my town. The house had been empty for almost 20 years. Windows were broken. The paint had peeled away like old skin. The yard was wild and choked with weeds that reached my knees as I pushed through the gate. People said a family had once lived there. A mother, a father, a little girl. One night the father disappeared. A week later, the mother was found dead in the bathtub. The little girl was never seen again. I was 22 and desperate to prove that I was not afraid of stories whispered by old neighbors. My channel Hidden Truth Diaries had just started to grow. I wanted something real, something that would make people question what they thought they knew about fear. So I packed a flashlight, a camera, a sleeping bag, and enough courage to ignore the tight feeling in my chest as I stepped through the front door. The air inside was heavy and damp. It smelled like mold and something sour that had soaked into the walls over time. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness and revealed a living room frozen in decay. A couch with stuffing spilling out, a coffee table coated in dust, family photos still hanging crooked on the wall. The glass over one frame was cracked. Inside it was a picture of a smiling couple and a little girl with dark hair and bright eyes. I told myself it was just another empty house, just wood and nails and broken glass. I set up my camera in the corner of the living room and pressed record. I spoke softly into the lens. I explained where I was. I described the rumors. I laughed at the idea that anything could actually happen. As the sun disappeared outside the broken windows, the temperature seemed to drop. The silence became thick. I could hear my own breathing, the faint hum of distant traffic, the occasional creak of old wood settling under its own weight. I laid out my sleeping bag near the wall and tried to relax. At around midnight, I heard the first sound that did not belong to the house. It was a soft thud from upstairs. I froze. I held my breath and listened. A minute passed. Nothing. I told myself it was a loose board or a raccoon that had found its way inside. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the staircase. The steps were narrow and covered in dust. No footprints except mine. Another thud, this time followed by what sounded like a slow dragging noise. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I hesitated at the bottom of the stairs. Then I started climbing. Each step groaned under my weight. The air grew colder as I reached the second floor. A hallway stretched out in front of me with 3 closed doors. The dragging sound came again from the last door at the end. I walked slowly. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. It was cold, colder than the air around me. I turned it and pushed the door open. The room was empty except for a small bed in the corner, faded pink walls, a closet with its door slightly open. Dust floated in the beam of my flashlight. I stepped inside. That was when the closet door slammed shut. I jumped back and almost dropped the flashlight. My breath came in sharp bursts. I stared at the closet waiting for it to move again. Nothing happened. I forced myself to walk toward it. I told myself it was just gravity, just old hinges giving way. I grabbed the handle and pulled the door open. Inside the closet there was nothing but darkness. Then I heard it, a whisper. It was so faint I thought I imagined it. A small voice. A child, right next to my ear. You found me. I spun around. The room was empty. My flashlight flickered. The beam dimmed, then brightened again. I felt a cold breath against the back of my neck. You found me. The voice was clearer this time. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. I backed toward the door. My foot caught on something and I stumbled. The flashlight fell from my hand and rolled across the floor. The beam pointed toward the bed. Someone was sitting on it. A small figure with long dark hair covering her face. Her legs hung over the edge of the mattress. She wore a pale dress that looked damp and stained. My body refused to move. My mind screamed at me to run, but my feet were rooted to the floor. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes were completely black. Her mouth stretched into a smile that was too wide for her face. "You found me," she said again. The flashlight went out. In total darkness, I felt small hands wrap around my ankle. The grip was ice cold and painfully tight. I kicked and screamed. I reached blindly for the door and managed to pull myself free. I ran down the hallway and almost fell down the stairs in my panic. As I reached the living room, the front door slammed shut on its own. I heard footsteps above me, slow and deliberate, moving toward the stairs. I grabbed my camera with shaking hands. The red light was still blinking, recording everything. The footsteps began descending. Step, step, step. Each one echoed through the house. I backed into the corner of the living room. The staircase was directly in front of me. My heart felt like it would explode. A shadow appeared at the top of the stairs. Small, thin, still. Then it started moving down toward me. I could see her clearly now in the faint moonlight. The same black eyes, the same twisted smile, but her head was tilted at an unnatural angle as if her neck were broken. "Why did you come?" she asked. I tried to speak, but no words came out. She reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped a few feet away from me. The air around her seemed darker than the rest of the room. "He is still here," she whispered. Before I could ask what she meant, the temperature dropped so suddenly that I saw my breath in front of me. A tall shape emerged behind her at the top of the stairs. Broad shoulders, a long shadow stretching down the wall. I could not see a face, only darkness where it should have been. The little girl turned her head slowly toward the figure. "He does not like visitors," she said. The tall shadow began descending the stairs. Each step made the house shake. I felt something press against my chest, an invisible force pushing me back against the wall. I could not move. I could not breathe. The shadow reached the bottom. It towered over the girl, over me. Two pale shapes appeared where its eyes should be. The little girl looked at me one last time. "Run," she whispered. The force against my chest vanished. I did not hesitate. I lunged for the front door and yanked it open. I stumbled out into the yard and did not look back. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. The next morning, I returned with the police. The house was empty. No footprints except mine. No sign of anyone else. But when I reviewed the footage from my camera, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The living room had been empty the entire time. There was no girl on the stairs, no shadow behind her. Only me, standing in the corner, screaming at nothing. The second story happened to a friend of mine named Daniel. He worked as a night security guard at an old hospital that had been closed for years. The building was scheduled for demolition, but until then someone had to patrol the halls and make sure no one broke in. Daniel did not believe in ghosts. He believed in overtime pay. The hospital had once been the largest in the county. It had 6 floors and 2 underground levels. Most of the equipment had been removed, but hospital beds and wheelchairs still lined some of the corridors. On his first night shift, he called me around 2 in the morning. His voice sounded uneasy. He told me that the building did not feel empty. He said the lights flickered even though the power lines had been checked. He said he heard distant announcements echoing through the speakers even though the system had been disconnected. I told him it was probably just old wiring, old pipes, and overactive imagination. The next night, he brought a small recorder with him. He planned to document the sounds and prove to himself that there was nothing supernatural about them. Around midnight, he was on the 4th floor near what used to be the pediatric wing. The walls were painted with faded murals of cartoon animals. Cracked tiles covered the floor. The air smelled of rust and disinfectant that had long since dried into the surfaces. As he walked down the hallway, he heard the squeak of wheels behind him. He turned. A wheelchair was rolling slowly down the corridor. There was no one pushing it. It moved in a straight line, then stopped directly in front of him. Daniel stood frozen. He told himself it was the slope of the floor, a draft of air. Then the wheelchair began moving again. This time it rolled backward, back toward the darkness at the end of the hall. He followed it. Against his better judgment, he followed it until it reached the last room on the right. The door to that room was slightly open. The wheelchair stopped just outside. Daniel pushed the door fully open. The room was empty except for a hospital bed in the center. Straps hung from its sides. The window was boarded up. The only light came from his flashlight. He stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He spun around and grabbed the handle. It would not budge. The temperature in the room dropped rapidly. His breath fogged in front of him. The straps on the bed began to move, slowly at first, then faster, as if something invisible was struggling against them. Daniel backed away until his legs hit the wall. The mattress sank in the middle as if a body had just laid down on it. Then the bed began to shake violently. The metal frame rattled against the floor. Daniel screamed for help, but his voice seemed swallowed by the room. A deep voice filled the air. Flatline. The word echoed again and again. Flatline. Flatline. The sound of a heart monitor beeped in the darkness even though there was no machine in the room. The mattress dipped deeper, as if whatever was lying there was turning its head toward him. Daniel felt something brush against his arm. A hand, cold and trembling. He looked down. There was nothing there, but the pressure increased, fingers tightening around his wrist. He felt himself being pulled toward the bed. The strap snapped upward and wrapped around his legs. He fell forward onto the mattress. The bed frame slammed against the floor once, twice, 3 times. He tried to free himself, but the straps tightened around his body, pinning him down. The deep voice spoke again. You should not be here. The pressure on his chest grew heavier, like someone sitting on him. He could not breathe. His vision blurred. In the corner of the room, a shape began to form. It looked like a man in a hospital gown. His skin was gray, his eyes hollow and sunken. Wires trailed from his arms and chest, disappearing into the air. The figure stepped closer to the bed. Daniel felt tears stream down his face. I am not your patient, he gasped. The figure tilted its head. Flatline, it whispered. The straps tightened one last time. Then suddenly everything stopped. The straps fell limp. The weight on his chest vanished. The door swung open on its own. Daniel rolled off the bed and crawled out of the room. He did not look back. The next day he quit. Weeks later, the building was demolished. But before it was torn down, Daniel received a call from one of the construction workers. They had found something in the rubble of the 4th floor pediatric wing. A hospital bed buried under debris, straps still attached, and skeletal remains strapped tightly to the mattress. The third story is the one that still keeps me awake at night. It happened to me. After the incident at the abandoned house, my channel grew quickly. People were fascinated by the footage, by my reaction, by the mystery of what I saw versus what the camera recorded. I received hundreds of messages. Most were supportive. Some were skeptical. One message stood out. It was from an account with no profile picture, no posts, no name, just a string of numbers. The message read, "You saw her because she wanted you to." I felt a chill run through me as I read it. I replied asking who they were. The response came almost instantly. She follows those who look for her. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just a troll trying to scare me. But the messages continued, night after night, always at exactly 3 in the morning. Always the same tone. She is closer now. Have you checked behind you? I started sleeping with the lights on. One night I woke up abruptly at 3 in the morning. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A new message. Look at your door. My heart pounded as I slowly turned my head toward my bedroom door. It was closed, but the handle was moving, slowly turning back and forth, as if someone on the other side was testing it. I sat up in bed, unable to move. The handle stopped. Silence filled the room. Then 3 soft knocks. I forced myself to speak. Who is there? No answer. My phone buzzed again. She is waiting. The bedroom door creaked open. Just a few inches. Darkness filled the gap. I could not see anything in the hallway. Then I saw 2 small black shapes appear at the height of a child. Eyes, watching me from the crack in the door. I grabbed the lamp from my nightstand and threw it toward the door. The bulb shattered. The room went dark. I heard light footsteps rush toward my bed. I felt the mattress dip near my feet. The same cold sensation wrapped around my ankle. You found me, a familiar voice whispered. I screamed and kicked free. I scrambled off the bed and ran for the light switch. When the lights flickered back on, the room was empty. The door was wide open. My phone buzzed one last time. Now he knows where you live. A deep, heavy thud echoed from the hallway outside my room. Step, step, step. The same deliberate sound I had heard in the house, moving toward my bedroom. The walls seemed to close in around me. The lights began to flicker violently. I backed into the corner, clutching my phone. The footsteps stopped just outside my door. A tall shadow stretched across the floor, reaching toward me. The air grew painfully cold. I realized then that this was not about a house. It was not about a hospital. It was about me. I had opened a door that should have stayed closed. The shadow moved into the room. It had no face, only 2 pale shapes where eyes should be. The little girl stood beside it, smiling. You looked for us, she said. Now we look for you. The lights went out. In the darkness, I felt the same crushing pressure against my chest, the same inability to breathe, the same whisper echoing in my ears. Flatline. You found me. He does not like visitors. I do not remember what happened next. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of my bedroom. Morning light streamed through the window. My phone was dead. The door was closed. Everything looked normal until I checked my camera. At some point during the night, it had turned on by itself. The footage showed me standing in the middle of my room at 3 in the morning, staring at the corner, whispering over and over, I see you. Behind me in the video, something moved, a tall, dark shape, and a small figure holding its hand. Since that night, the messages have stopped. The house at the edge of town was burned down in an unexplained fire. The hospital is gone. But sometimes at exactly 3 in the morning, I wake up with the feeling that someone is standing beside my bed, watching, waiting for me to close my eyes. And every time I do, I hear the same whisper in the darkness.